In 2007, Hamburg started building a concert hall on top of an old harbour warehouse. The estimated cost was around 200 million euros. 9 years later, it finally opened. Over 900% over budget. 6 years late, with a fired project coordinator, a successor accused of concealment, and a halted construction site that sat frozen for months, while everyone involved sued each other in public. Final bill, roughly 870 million euros, paid mostly by German taxpayers. By every normal measure, this should be a national joke. More than 25 million people have visited it since. Stand on the waterfront in Hafen City at dusk and look up. A wave-shaped glass crown sits on top of a red brick warehouse that has been there since the 1960s. The crown is lit from inside. The harbour reflects it. Tourists are queuing at the base for what is, by some counts, the longest curved escalator in the world. By any visual measure, this is one of the most photographed buildings in Germany. It does not look like a disaster. That is the first part of the trick. Because by the numbers it was. The original public budget was modest. Hamburg's feasibility study priced the project at around 204 million euros, with local taxpayers expected to cover roughly 95 million of that. The final figure landed at about 870 million. That is a 925% overrun, 9 times the original number, on a public concert hall. In one of Europe's most fiscally disciplined countries, there is more. Construction ran 6 years past its original timeline. The acoustic skin for the concert hall alone climbed from a budgeted 3.5 million euros to 15 million. The custom windows were so large and so exposed that construction had to stop entirely whenever wind speeds exceeded 40 kilometers an hour, because if a sheet of glass swung loose, it could kill someone below. The world's longest curved escalator inside was its own engineering problem. Every individual technical element of the building seemed to invent a new way to be expensive. That is the case against this project. It is real, it is documented, and for nearly a decade in the German press, it was the only case anyone was making. You can already feel the gravitational pull this should have had. Across the country, around the same years, another flagship project was failing in exactly this style. Berlin-Brandenburg Airport, over budget, over schedule, mocked daily. At one point, German commentators were comparing the two projects directly. Hamburg's concert hall got nicknamed Hamburg's Berlin Airport. Berlin's airport was, by then, about 3 billion euros over budget, 6 years late and counting. Two flagship projects, both running away from their numbers, both managed by parts of the same public procurement culture, both becoming national punchlines. And yet only one of them stayed a punchline. You do not need an architecture degree to see why this kind of thing usually ends badly. Public megaprojects fail in patterns. The Elbphilharmonie hit every single one of those patterns. So how did it walk out the other side and become a postcard? To understand the trap, go back to where it was set. The project began as a private initiative, not as a state vision. The architect-developer Alexander Gerard and his wife commissioned an original design from the Swiss firm Herzog & de Meuron and promoted the project for 3.5 years on their own. The original idea was elegant. Take a 1960s harbour warehouse named the Kaispeicher A, and instead of tearing it down, build a wave-shaped glass structure on top of it. Old port industry, plus new cultural ambition, stacked vertically. It was striking. It got attention. Then the city of Hamburg took over the project and decided to develop it itself. That handover is where the original sin enters. A private idea became a public obligation. The financial structure built around it was built on an assumption that the income from the private side of the project would absorb whatever the public side cost. The plan was to commercialize the building's lower portions, a high-class hotel, restaurants, apartments, parking. The profits from leasing and selling those would, in theory, cross-subsidize the public concert hall above. Hamburg's actual commitment, on paper, was supposed to stay modest. You can see the design of this trap in advance. It assumed that the private side would always be more profitable than the public side would be expensive. The moment that ratio inverted, the public bill kept rising, and the assumed cross-subsidy could not catch up. Then came the contract that broke everything else. At the moment the construction contract was signed, the design of the building was still unfinished. Planning continued in parallel with the building itself going up, meaning every time the architects refined a piece of the design, the builders had to recost it, and the contractor adjusted upwards. Fixed-price contracts work when the thing being priced is finished. The Elbphilharmonie's was not. Every change order after that point landed straight on the public ledger. This is where the project stops looking like architectural ambition and starts looking like financial physics. You cannot fix a price on a building nobody has finished drawing. You cannot pretend the design refinements that follow won't cost money. And once you've signed, you cannot easily unwind the contract without admitting you signed something unworkable. By the late 2000s, the cost trajectory was visible to anyone who wanted to look. Hamburg City Council later opened an investigation into who was supposed to be watching this and what they did. The findings were specific. The city's own project coordinator, Hartmut Wegener, was found to have lacked the expert knowledge the role required and was replaced in 2008. His successor, Heribert Leutner, was later accused of having concealed the true scale of the building's problems. Then Mayor Ole von Beust, the investigation said, should have flagged possible problems with the construction plans. His city councillor was accused of failing in his responsibilities. You are not reading about a project that simply got expensive. You are reading about a project whose internal controls were specifically named, by a public inquiry, as having broken at the level of personal accountability. The cost overruns weren't only ambition meeting reality, they were ambition, hidden by people whose job was to catch exactly this, until they couldn't hide it anymore. Then, in November 2011, the project stopped. After prolonged disputes between the architect, the contractor, and the city, construction was halted entirely. The major contractor, Hochtief, and the architects, Herzog and de Meuron, started blaming each other in public. Hochtief claimed the architects had repeatedly changed designs and submitted plans late, driving up costs and delays. The architects pushed back. Some cost increases reflected legitimate evolving technical requirements. Others were, in their view, simply unjustified by the contractor. Both positions had supporters in the press. Neither could move the building forward on their own, so a half-built glass crown sat there, on top of an old harbour warehouse, frozen, cranes still in place, roof unfinished, acoustic interior incomplete, money already spent in the high hundreds of millions, with no concert hall to show for it. At this point, anyone reading the headlines could have written the rest of the script in advance. They had seen it before. Berlin's airport was doing exactly this. Other European megaprojects were doing exactly this. Hamburg's would now spend the next decade as a permanent embarrassment. That is the moment most of these stories settle into their final shape. The construction halt is the point of no return. Except, in Hamburg, it wasn't. In April 2013, a new contract amendment was signed. A revised total of around 575 million euros. The constructor agreeing to accept liability for both the work already done and the work still to come. From that point forward, the project actually moved. The interior finished, the acoustics were installed, the plaza, the wide public observation level inside the building, was completed. The wave-shaped glass crown was sealed. And then, in early 2017, this thing opened. By its first birthday, the building had welcomed 4 million visitors and over 660,000 concert attendees. Within a decade, more than 25 million people had visited the plaza. By that measure, it had become one of the most popular attractions in Europe, comparable in foot traffic to the Empire State Building or the London Eye. The Elbphilharmonie now reportedly draws more annual concert-goers than the Vienna Concert House, the Amsterdam Concertgebouw, or the Paris Philharmonie. If this script were following the pattern of every other case in this series, you would now be reading about a trap that snapped shut and never opened again. The renovation that costs more than the building, the demolition nobody can agree on, the empty floor that nobody can fill. Hamburg did not get that ending. And it is worth stopping to ask why. Because the answer is not, the building is just beautiful. The answer is more uncomfortable than that. Look at what the city did between the 2011 construction halt and the 2017 opening. First, the new contract amendment in 2013 did something most public projects in similar trouble fail to do. It actually held a binding cost ceiling, clear liability, the constructor on the hook for both retrospective and prospective work. Most renegotiations at this scale fall apart again within a year. This one didn't. Second, the post-2011 city government made a deliberate choice not to treat the building purely as a financial wound. While the rest of the country was still calling it Hamburg's Berlin Airport, the city was already rebranding it as a public good. Outreach campaigns were designed. Deeply discounted tickets started circulating through libraries and community access points. The explicit stated goal was to get every young Hamburger into the hall at least once. That is not the marketing strategy of a city trying to hide a building. That is the marketing strategy of a city betting that ownership beats embarrassment. Third, the building itself did one thing that no rescue plan can manufacture in advance. It worked. The acoustics, the same acoustics whose cost had ballooned from €3.5 million to 15, were genuinely good. The hall functioned as a hall. The plaza, free to access, drew foot traffic the moment the doors opened. The wave-shaped glass crown that had been the source of endless construction nightmares turned out to be one of the most photographed objects in Northern Europe. You can hear the trap snapping shut on someone else here. The trap was supposed to be, the public hates the building, the bills keep rising, the resentment becomes permanent, the project becomes a generational embarrassment that taints every future infrastructure pitch. That is the trap most of these stories live inside. Hamburg watched it close on Berlin-Brandenburg and walked sideways. The press eventually softened. Der Spiegel's own later comparative analysis described the Elbphilharmonie's Overrun as, in its words, relatively modest set against other major international megaprojects. That is not nothing. That is the same press culture that had spent years documenting every cost overrun, every fired official, every halted week of construction, eventually filing the project under worked out fine. So the natural question to ask, as a viewer, is whether this was actually a clean ending or just an extremely fortunate one. And here is where the script has to stay honest with you. The original sin did not disappear. The bill is still on the record. German taxpayers ultimately covered a public share that rose from a projected €77 million to €789 million for the public portion alone. That is the same kind of overrun, in the same direction, for the same reasons, that defines every other case in this series. The unfinished design at contract signature, the fixed price contract that couldn't survive contact with reality, the named officials accused of concealment, the construction halt, the years of delay. Every mechanism of failure was present, in textbook form. What was different is what came after. Not the failure mechanism, the absorption mechanism. The city kept paying. The contractor accepted prospective liability, the renegotiation held, the acoustics delivered, the building filled up, and somewhere in all of that, the same press and public that had spent a decade calling this a disaster started calling it a landmark. You can read that two ways. The generous version is that competent post-2013 governance, careful renegotiation, and a genuinely good architectural product turned a half-failed project into a success, that the trap had escape hatches if the right people opened them in time. The harder version is that Hamburg got away with a process failure of historic proportions because the finished building happened to be beautiful, and that the same story, with a less photogenic outcome, would have ended the way most of these stories end, in resentment, in audit reports, in a hall that nobody could ever quite love. The sourcing does not cleanly pick a side. The official inquiries are unsparing about the process, the lacked expertise, the concealment, the named officials. The visitor numbers and the press reassessments are unsparing about the outcome, the millions through the door, the concerts, the plaza traffic. Both are real. They do not cancel each other out. What's unusual is that, in most cases in this series, the failure becomes the building's permanent identity. It haunts every press release, every birthday, every renovation pitch. In Hamburg, the failure became a footnote, a true footnote, fully on the record, occasionally referenced, almost never actually felt by the people walking up the world's longest curved escalator today. Look one more time at the harbour at dusk. The wave-shaped crown is lit. The warehouse below holds it up. The lifts run. The hall fills. Tourists pose with the glass. Concerts sell out. 25 million plaza visitors, and counting. By the rules this kind of project usually plays by, this building should not be loved. It went over budget by a factor of nearly 10. It missed its deadline by 6 years. It froze mid-construction. It outlived a coordinator who was fired, and a successor accused of hiding the truth. It earned a national nickname, comparing it to one of Germany's most notorious infrastructure failures. It did everything a trap building does to get itself stuck in permanent embarrassment. It just refused to stay stuck. Most of the cases in this series end with the same uncomfortable shape. Every option is bad. The building outlasts the dream. The city has to keep paying for a structure it no longer fully wants. Hamburg's ending breaks that shape. It is the version of these stories where the building grows past the failure that made it, and it raises a question worth leaving open, because the sourcing leaves it open too. Did Hamburg earn this ending through a better second decision than other cities have made? Or did the city just get extremely lucky that the thing it had committed to building turned out to be worth all of it? Both could be true. The Elbphilharmonie does not need you to choose. What it does every night on the waterfront is sit there, too well loved to embarrass anyone anymore, too expensive to forget how it got there. The bill is paid, the crown is lit, the building is full, and somewhere in a Hamburg archive, the inquiry that named the people who couldn't keep this from happening is still sitting on a shelf, true, untouched, and almost completely irrelevant to the queue forming for tonight's 8 o'clock concert.